Why would you pick up and move your whole life? That's wild. Hi, this is Heather Morgan, and welcome to Wandering the Wild Mess with Heather Morgan. I'm so happy that you're here. And I want to start off saying that this is the time that we wander this wild mess together. And as a bit of an intro, I want to kind of give you a little bit of background of a question that I get often from people when they learn that I moved from Utah, born and raised, only place I ever lived, to then take off to Nashville, Tennessee, after really building a life in Utah for many years. So, to answer that question, long story short, when someone new asks me that question, because I get it asked often while I'm out, I say, I just wanted to see the sunset from somewhere else. And that is really true. I think in my heart of hearts, I've always known that I wanted to be somewhere else besides Utah from like a fairly younger age when I first started to think about moving and living out of my parents' house. I wanted to go somewhere else. And the one thing that I see to be true throughout every time I considered leaving is the one thing that stopped me was fear every single time. I even think back to living at my parents and thinking, okay, I move out. What am I going to do? And I remember a moment like I could work on a cruise ship, a random thought. What about that? And then I could travel and I could see all these different places and I can learn all these things. And I was Googling it and doing all the research. And then I'm like, I can't do that. I literally just decided for myself that that wasn't an option for me, that I couldn't do that. I didn't know anyone that had done that. It just seemed so unrealistic for me. So I let it go. But what I realized is more frequently than not, I continued to think about how do I move? But it's almost as if I wanted to think about it but not do it. And I think we all go through those phases where something's in our mind and in our heart and we continue to think about it. We want to do it. It sounds great. We're so excited. But then at the end of the day, the actions and the uncomfortability and the focus and all of the things that come along with changing your life in any sort of way, changing your job, leaving a relationship, leaving a friendship, whatever it may be, every kind of change takes some level of discomfort and actually takes action. And as much as we don't want to have to change our life, like comfort is just where we prefer to be, even if we're not happy with it. We like it. It's a weird truth. So anyways, I had thought and considered moving out of Utah many times, but I just never had the courage. It never seemed like the right time. And that's just true to a lot of things in life, I think, that we want to do. We kind of put them on the back burner because it just never is the right moment. But as I learned, as I continued to get older and I had friends that had kids, there's never the right moment pretty much for anything except for the moment you want to do it. That's the moment. If you're looking for the right moment to do something, right when you want to do it, that's it. That's when you should do it. And I'm not saying always be impulsive, although I wish I was more impulsive and I'm working on that. I actually can be now. Um, but I do think if you really want to do it, go for it. I would definitely have told my younger self to forget about the fear and just go for it. But it's so hard to know what you don't know. Like it's impossible, all right? Let's be real. So, me not knowing what I didn't know, we'll kind of go through the timeline of why Tennessee. I am getting back to that. But I'm trying to just paint a picture of I always knew I wanted to leave. Nashville, Tennessee wasn't always the place. There was a moment where New York seemed like it would be a fit for me. There was a moment that leaving the country, England seemed like somewhere to be. I think it was a lot of different things in my head that were telling me I wanted to be somewhere else, but I just couldn't like pinpoint where it was. And looking back now, maybe those things and my fear, I let that get in the way because maybe I wasn't supposed to go there. Maybe until my mind knew I was supposed to be in Tennessee, it wouldn't allow me to leave. I don't know. But to many, fast forward to many, many years with staying in the same place, being where I wasn't sure I wanted to be. And my whole world just got disrupted. A lot of things changed in my life, and it showed me that I might as well add one more thing to the mix. So really why Tennessee? It's more why did I leave, to be honest, but Tennessee played a big role in that. So why I left is because everything I knew didn't feel like home anymore. I think that's the true answer of why I had to leave Utah after all that time. There wasn't something specific about Utah. I love the mountains. I loved hiking. It was so close to everything. I grew up camping and on the lake and fishing and all the things that you could imagine. It's so many beautiful things in Utah that I love. And then it was all I ever knew and it really was a bubble. And that's a whole other discussion. Growing up Mormon, just being in the Utah culture forever, you definitely have a different perspective and mindset, and you're a little sheltered, if I'm honest, from a lot of other places in the world, or at least in the US that I've experienced in talking to people and understanding and connecting with them and their stories. I think there's things that kind of kept me naive longer than others about growing up in Utah. So I love and have nothing but love for the state of Utah. Is anywhere perfect? No. But I loved it and I'm proud to say I'm from there. But it wasn't home anymore. I would drive down the streets and it was like, this isn't it. This isn't where I'm supposed to be anymore. There was too many memories between leaving this relationship that was almost all I had ever known and then flashbacks of my life when my dad was still in it. So that's for another time, but I'd lost my dad when he was 49 years old. So that point in time in my life was very, very difficult for me because my dad was my best friend. And I think with any grief, you kind of bury it for a while, but then there's some times that you think you worked through those things and then you're triggered again. And I think the grief of leaving my marriage and grieving the wife that I was and the best friend that I had and all of the things triggered the reminder of the grief of losing my father too. And so I just had like this overwhelming amount of grief every time I drove around a street in Salt Lake. I didn't feel like I knew that person anymore. I didn't know his wife. I didn't know his daughter. I didn't know the girl I was, bright-eyed after high school. Like, I didn't know any of those things anymore. I didn't identify with them. Let's just call it that. I didn't know what to do with myself in a place that was telling me who I was, but I wasn't that anymore. So, one day I remember driving through, I was on the east side of the valley in Sandy, and that's where my grandparents lived, and so I had a lot of, like, childhood memories in that area, and I was like, "I can't live here. Live here in Utah, I can't." And it just hit me. And I think that night specifically, and like many others during this process, I drank too much box wine. Sorry, mom. And just sat there on the couch, like, where do I go? And if you're anyone that knows what a wine buzz is like, I don't know who you think you are, but I'm just looking at houses, probably like people talk about you're on Zillow, just like, I could live here. Like, what about this one? Oh, that kitchen's not upgraded. You're doing the whole thing like it's gonna be real. But I was delusional enough to think, what the hey? So I looked at some cute little white house in Hendersonville, Tennessee. Never heard of it. Saw it was about 30 minutes from the city or so. Thought that's just like me in Salt Lake, living in a suburb. Wow, there's a lake here and everything. So I started just really like reading about the city. It's safe, this, that, all these things. And I was like, all right, Hendersonville sounds good. How about this house? So I think I clicked to like, go see this house or whatever. And so it gave my information to a realtor. The next sober day, so the next morning, I get a call like, "Hi, this is so and so. Like, do you want to see this house in Hendersonville, Tennessee?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm in Utah. I didn't even really think about that last night, but what the hey?" Because I was saying yes to every new thing at this point in my life. So much change was happening. I was just like, sure, sure, sure. Why not? So I literally booked a flight to Nashville shortly after. By the time I could fly and arrange it with work to get out and all of that, the house was already gone. But I was like, I think I like Hendersonville, so let's just go. So I booked my flight, and I remember telling myself on the flight, when I land, I will know if I'm meant to be in Tennessee. I will just know. That was very clear in my mind. So as soon as I touched down in BNA, I was like, this is it. I'm moving to Tennessee. And I remember thinking, okay, like my job, am I just telling him? And I'm in my hotel room, just like already, I just landed, got to my hotel room, put my suitcase down, and I'm already like, hey, what do I tell my boss? I'm moving. I know it. I have to live here. There's not any other place. I hadn't even went out anywhere. I had literally taken what I think I had a rental. So I'd grabbed a rental car and drove from the airport to kinda, I don't know, it was a little bit dumpy where I stayed the first hotel, but somewhere close to Nashville now, and I live here and I don't even know where that is, but maybe West Nashville? I don't know. I don't wanna call that dumpy for anyone that lives there. I don't know. The hotel was a little, but it was fine. It was a great memory. So, anyways, I'm there, and so it's not like I saw some Nashville, you know, hype. I just literally went to this hotel and that was it, and I knew. I don't know. Very delusional. But so I thought, how am I gonna do that? Well, before I did all that, I did take a trip to see houses in Hendersonville, and I was like, "I love it out here. Absolutely love it." So after I toured the city, I knew I would wanna live there, but I did still wanna go downtown, but I didn't wanna do, like, touristy. I had never been to Broadway, I had never done any of that. So I asked my realtor, "Where would I go if I lived here?" And so she said, "Midtown. Go to Winners and Losers." So I first bar I go to is Winners, and I meet this girl from Dallas. We have the best time ever. That's such a story. That night was wild. But we end up after meeting some musicians that were playing in Winners, and we walked over to Losers, and I had my first green tea shot. Sorry again, mom. I drink, so there's gonna be a lot of that. But I had my first green tea shot, never had one, had the best time with them. Uh, it was so fun, and Losers is now my favorite bar in Nashville. So that's also wild that was like the first Winners and Losers was the first bar I ever went to and is still my all-time favorite. So I go to this bar. I was like, I just love it. Everything about this city is so fun. So I go home from that trip knowing I want to live in Tennessee, in Hendersonville specifically at that time. So then I go home and I don't even know how. Like at this time, I'm still going through my separation. I my ex wants to buy the home that we owned and I have to sell it to him because it's in my name. So it's a whole lot of things going on behind the scenes and I'm working and all the things. So I go back to Salt Lake and I end up telling my boss, "Sorry, I've been a little if I haven't been as focused, I am moving." And she was like, "Okay, sounds great. I support you. I have been divorced, this and that." Gives the whole spill, the green light. I'm like, "Yes." Super appreciative for that. But then enter a lot more things. What happened from there was that let me pause this. So I tell her I'm moving. I get the green light. Here we go. Still no real plan. I'm just going along. I'm just literally wandering the wild mess. I'm literally doing that. That's I didn't have this idea yet, but that's what I was doing all along. So I knew. So I'm going through this. All right, well, I'm moving. I don't really know how, but I am. And I remember it was just in my head, like I decided this time. Like I didn't even have time for the fear because my mind was made up and I was just telling everyone. Like I legitimately remember telling a guy I met after being way too drunk at the Morgan Wallen concert in Salt Lake. My drunk self said, "Don't fall in love with me. I'm moving to Tennessee." That was literally like a week later. I didn't even know how I was moving. I didn't have a house there. I didn't have a place. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any family there. Like, I'm just delusional enough to believe that that's what I'm doing in some short amount of time with no real game plan for how that's going to work. But this is the mindset I was in. So I'm moving to Tennessee. The decision is made. So fast forward months and months of just a lot of heartache and hard conversations and just grown up stuff that even when you're grown up, which I don't know if I ever feel like I am, but as grown up as you can be, I don't know if you ever still want to deal with grown up stuff. But all of that happened. So before it finishes, before I get to where we're going, where I get to Tennessee, strangely, I decide I have this urge to go back one more time before I move. I still don't really know. I say in my head I want to move by the end of the year, which at that time was the end of 2022. But things just took longer, moving in the winter, like all these things. So it didn't work out. The divorce wasn't finalized. It just couldn't happen. So I decided to go back to Tennessee for my second time at the end of 2022 because I didn't want to talk about my divorce with my family at the Christmas party. Guilty. So I was like, why not go back to Nashville? This time I can do the touristy stuff. Because the first trip, I literally didn't go to Broadway or do anything like that. Not even anything. It was literally like that one event at Losers. And then I went to the Opry. Okay, so I go back to Nashville the end of the year, 2022, and it was a life-changing trip. I had met someone on that trip that literally allowed me to move on the way I needed to from my marriage. And I mean that in the sense that you get really afraid. And if you've ever, I'm sure, been in a breakup or a relationship, we get so afraid that we're not going to be okay on the other side of it. And that doesn't even mean just a relationship. That could be a job or changing what you want to do with your life. You know, you have some level of predictability when you're in something that you know. But when you leave that, you're like, am I going to be okay on the other side of it? Is this going to pan out? Is this going to work? You just don't know. And that trip to Nashville gave me the introduction to a person who would be a pivotal character or person, or I don't know what you want to call it in the plot, but someone that needed to be there for me to see that I would be okay on the other side. And not a forever thing, not a forever thing, just the right thing that I needed in that moment. So I'm very grateful looking back on that story, which will definitely be for another time, of why that all happened. But I say this to say that there are so many people in our lives that we're introduced to or that we meet with reason, season, lifetime, right? They're there for a reason, they're there for a season, or they'll be a part of your life for a lifetime. You don't really know. But there's always some sort of underlining reason for that interaction. And sometimes it's as simple as the sweet girls I met from Minnesota at the hotel bar in Nashville before I went to Broadway. They're the ones that went to Broadway with me. Had I had not been with them and had they been not talking to other Vikings fans, the whole trajectory of the night could have went completely different. So even if it was a brief, and I do still have one of them as my contact. So it's not like she was still there. So I'm all that to say is that's what's so great about living life and meeting people and relationships, because it puts you in places you need to be and allows you to discover things you need to discover about yourself, about your life, about who you are, about where you're going. There's so many lessons in interactions, human interactions. So while you're thinking about this and you're trying to go, okay, why'd you move? We're waiting for that story. Let me just throw in that it's really important to be out in the world interacting with people, because you just never know how it can change your life. So, again, I'm still planning to move to Tennessee, and this Knoxville guy thankfully presents himself into my life to reassure me with actions, not words, that I'm going to be all right. So I go back home and then I end up in Knoxville for a little over a week. And that's when I really know. So I come back. I had went to Nashville for one a couple of days right before Christmas. I come back, go to Knoxville from the day after Christmas till New Year's, and now I know I'm going to be good. That whole trip showed me everything that I needed to see in order for me to be okay. Because as soon as I got back from that trip, I sold my house to my ex-husband, and I know that that could have felt really, really hard, because that, while we were waiting for the divorce to be finalized, that was like a piece that I sat in the car and I remember thinking, if that and if I hadn't have met and had that experience in Knoxville, I don't think I think I would have been breaking down. And it wasn't this, "Oh, this new person's replacing everything that I've known." It was this person showing me I'm going to be okay without knowing they're showing me I'm gonna be okay. And I really, really needed that. I think everyone in life has those moments, and I hope you do, where you took a chance on something and then you get reassured, like, "Look, that was you're gonna be okay." or you didn't take a chance and it's just your circumstances, like someone left you or you got let go out of a job and then all of a sudden you're like, how is this going to work out? And then something happens and you're like, I'm going to be okay. It was really that for me. And it absolutely meant so much. And I think it was not just one-sided because this person he was also going through something incredibly different that he was gonna have to go through, and I think we both could just relate on that level to changing up everything we've ever known, and it was perfect. Like, the stars aligned, and it's not always, like, a love connection, sometimes it's just a being there when you need someone to be there for the right reasons kinda thing, and I think that's beautiful. I think there's beauty in that just as much as finding your forever person. I think everyone has a place in your life. All right. So as we're dabbling down this journey to Nashville or Hendersonville, really, I sold the house. We get we have we finalized the divorce. Well, we're waiting for the paperwork to be final. And I remember it was January 30th. I had plans to go to dinner with one of my friends who also had been divorced previously, a couple of times actually, because she got married super young, as people in Utah do, and yes, but we were at dinner, and we were going to dinner, and I found out that day, and ironically, we were going to the sushi spot in which me and my ex always celebrated everything, and then I was there at the same sushi spot with her on the day my divorce was finalized. So that's when the clock started ticking. I had 30 days to get out of the house. I was still in the house. That was the agreement. So I had to get out. So it was like crunch time. So everything just was fast forward and slow at the same time. I couldn't even think about how I was going to do this, but I just was. So I got an Airbnb for 1 month in East Nashville. Never been to East at the time. And I remember that I was sitting in my car, like, after I sold the house to my ex, and I thought, I'm homeless. Like, I don't have a home now. I have an Airbnb for 30 days in Nashville, and then we'll just see where we go from there. It was crazy to think about. So, during those 30 days, it was just crunch time. Pretty much gave everything to my ex in the house. Didn't take pretty much anything, and packed up I have this older, like, 2013 BMW sedan with way too many miles on it that before I left for Tennessee, broke down on the side of the road when I was going up hiking in the snow, and I had to pay way too much money to fix it. I said, "Just get me to Tennessee with this thing," because I didn't have a car payment. I knew I just needed to get to Tennessee with it, and I'd figure it out from there. By some grace of God, I made it to Tennessee in this in this thing. Thank you. But there was so much that happened. But I headed off to Tennessee, and the rest is a lot of history, literally. There was so many things I had no idea that I would come across. So many things that I overanalyzed or didn't think about enough. I just had me, my dog, enough stuff to fit that could fit in my car, and 1 month's Airbnb. And we were just gonna figure it out. And we did. So keep wandering the wild mess with me for more. That's how I decided Nashville, Tennessee, and a little bit on the journey after I decided, but I can't wait to share more. Thanks for listening. Wandering the Wild Mess with Heather Morgan.